Despite being one of the most vaccinated countries, Israel again is, of course, seeing a surge. Now, in my last video, I had talked about India and how India had stated that the social media, mainstream media were constantly referring to the virus as the Indian strain or the Indian virus. And then India came out with a from their basically their health organization and says stop referring to stop referring to it as the Indian variant. There's no such thing as the Indian variant. And so that narrative kind of disappeared, especially if you look at the chart for cases in India. You'd see literally a huge plummet in the number of cases in India. As quickly as it went up is as quickly as it came down. Now, India doesn't necessarily have the best when it comes to just overall cleanliness in terms of their culture. And then you take it a step further in terms of, their ability to render aid, medically speaking, to their citizens, not exactly at the top of the charts. But yet, when you look at the death per capita when it comes to in India by comparison to the UK, the EU, and America, India is far below those regions. India is like 50th below America. America is like in the top 50s, and India is like in the hundreds, like 108th or 110th in terms of per capita, meaning that their amount of people per capita is actually lower, even despite everything I just said about not having a great in terms of cleanliness, in terms of the culture, and of course in terms of the medical institutions and their ability. They're still far below where America is. Now, of course, the current narrative is to get people to be fearful over now what is referred to as the Delta variant. Now, the Delta variant is the Indian variant, and it just got changed. It originally, where did I talk about it in my last video? It showed up where? In the UK, and of course, for many of these different countries, it is being utilized to limit trade, to limit movement, etc., especially in the UK. It says those, and it says vaccinated Israelis may need to quarantine because of the Delta variant. And in India, they said they tried to attribute it to the vaccine. But when you looked at the chart, where the chart literally plummets, only like 3% of their country has taken one shot. Only like, I think it's like 3.5 from the last time that I checked. Like 3.5% of the population. When you see it, literally, you look at the chart goes straight up and the chart goes straight back down. And when you look at the peak of where it starts to drop is at 3.5% vaccination. So vaccination has nothing to do with why basically the virus peaked out. And of course, this is always in reference to cases and not to hospitalizations. And like I said, as a nurse, what matters to me is not cases, but hospitalizations, where individuals need a physician, right? Like Jesus said, the healthy do not need a physician, but the ailing do. And so if no one is ailing, and I use that term loosely, no one, then you really don't look at any particular disease in a way that should be alarming. Where it would be alarming is where we were seeing many individuals coming into the hospital, and especially if they were young, and succumbing to the disease process, where medication and modern medicine was of no benefit because these individuals, they don't understand what exactly to utilize. But if you actually were paying attention, India actually started using ivermectin, and I had talked about ivermectin in one of my last videos, where a hospital here in New Jersey started utilizing ivermectin, and they were seeing very good results as a result of utilizing that medication. Just going to show you that if that is true, then many of these individuals who previously had died as a result of not utilizing many of the older medications that we had were actually sacrificed intentionally. Now, there are quite a few different articles that talk about this, about how according to the new Indian variant, which is what we're going to refer to it as, is the Indian variant. The Delta variant is the Indian variant. And like I said, even though they talk about it being the most widely spread, now if this is the case for all of these individuals that are vaccinated, and it just goes to show you that these people don't think things through. The purpose is to fearmonger you, to get you to run out and take it because, you know, there's another variant, etc. But if all these people who already got vaccinated are now worried about this variant, then what's the point of taking the vaccine if now you are subject to this new variant that is going to put you at risk, right? You see, like when you like Jesus said, Jesus would, especially when talking to the religious leaders of his day, and they would try to trip him up under something, he would get them to look at what they're saying to its logical conclusion, showing how foolishly, like for example, when Jesus was healing everybody and he was curing people, and they said the only way that he's able to do this is because the devil is in him, and the devil is the one who is expelling these demons, and the devil is the one who is giving the authority to do all these things. And then Jesus said, if Satan expels Satan, his kingdom will fall, right? Showing that they were not thinking to the logical conclusion of their statement. And this is exactly what you see with governments. Governments utilize these sort of statements, but when you actually think about it to its logical conclusion, it falls flat. And so that's why this is basically utilized to fearmonger to new individuals. It will always be a new variant. That new variant will be the next thing that the government will utilize, or politicians that will utilize to promote fear, to get you to run out and give up your freedom up here, because that's really all that they care about, is getting individuals to basically take it. And once you fully give up the right of what you choose to put into your body, then the government can get you to do basically anything. And that is basically the point. Now, again, there's multiple articles talking about how the big push is to inoculate the young, right? And of course, we've seen even in Israel, and now we're seeing it in America, where many young individuals who have very strong immune systems. And what many people don't understand about immunity is not everybody is going to have antibodies, right? So if you actually succumb to the virus and you start to feel sick, your body will fight it off and produce antibodies. But if your body and your immune system is so strong that it just immediately wipes out the virus, you won't have antibodies because you have such a strong immune response that your body just wipes out the virus even before your body needs to produce antibodies. You have such a strong T cell response that it just kills the virus without even having to worry about antibodies. Antibodies are created when your body has a reaction to a virus, and your body then has to fight it off. And as a result of a prolonged battle, right, then your body will make antibodies after the fact. Now, of course, many young people who typically have very strong immune systems are now being subject to taking the jab despite the science. There's no science that talks about, there's no science that they can point to and say, young people are highly likely to experience, getting very gravely ill. What they refer to is the same narrative about young people will be carriers and they might infect X, Y, and Z individuals, even though the data doesn't show it. But it all hinges upon the asymptomatic spread narrative, which I have shown in numerous videos, where even Dr. Fauci himself says that a pandemic is not spread by asymptomatic response, right? Asymptomatic individuals are not the drivers. These are his own words of a pandemic. Drivers of a pandemic are always symptomatic individuals. And so if you do have any sort of symptoms, then you can wear a mask to minimize the spread, or you can stay home until you're not feeling symptomatic. And this has always been the case. And as typically as nurses, even if you felt a little bit achy, you were still coming to work. You were not staying home because you felt a little slow or because you had a little sniffle, because if everybody did that during these seasonal months where people get sick and they come into the hospital, there would be no staff. There would be no staff members to take care of the actual people who are sick. Yes, you might have a little cough, typically when they told you to stay home is if you had a fever, because then you were really sick, right? You were really sick that the body had to create an immune response, such an immune response that it had to elevate your temperature to fend off the virus temporarily. And so in those cases, they would say, yes, you can reasonably stay home. Reasonably speaking, for the most part, as healthcare workers, we don't stay home because we got a little sniffle. That's how stuff basically gets called around within the doctors and within the nurses, because we're all within close quarters within another. And so one person gets sick, and they'll say, well, what's going around? And they'll kind of let people know, do a little more hand washing. If you're feeling sick, wear something so that it doesn't spread to everybody else. Because what will happen is you're strong, you'll shrug it off over after a couple of days, but you might come in contact with a patient who might be more susceptible to getting sick. With that said, this is not the case with this particular disease, as the statistics have shown that even those who are elderly, 95% of them still survive. So it's not the type of a disease where, and of course, because of a lack of medication, many individuals have unfortunately lost their life. But now what we're seeing is many of these individuals who are getting vaccinated are actually particularly the young people who are now showing up sick. As it goes on to say, it says the world's most vaccinated country has returned to life as normal, but it says that the C19 numbers has arrived again with terrifying. I believe it's 125 that they said here. The numbers are kind of going up, and it says 70% of these are linked, of course, to the Delta variant, which is the Indian variant. Now, this, of course, is to push to get many of the young people to get inoculated. But again, when you look at the actual data, you see very similar, and also in places, for example, in the UK. The UK talks about this exact same thing, in which it says here that are driven by who? By the unvaccinated young. Now, this is the goal, is to get people afraid, of the young people, get people afraid of the different variants. But then when you actually do a little bit of research, if you've actually looked into the numbers in India, you would see that it's not the case. India has a huge population. It's over 1 billion people that live in India. And so when they talk about 50,000 or 60,000, when you look by comparison to the population, those are very small numbers, especially when you look at the deaths per capita, which is lower than America, despite having a worse off medical system, despite having a worse off in terms of personal cleanliness. They still have less deaths than America by comparison. And so it just goes to show you that if you just do a little bit of research and take a look at all these different articles, they will paint a picture, right? They will paint the picture for you when you start to do a little bit of research, instead of just looking at things from a very small perspective. You have to look at things from a wide angle to really understand. And the primary purpose of this is when people ask you why you didn't take it, or they might just say things, well, like you're an anti-vaxxer, or you're a Republican, or you're a Trump, or you're on the right, etc. They want to throw you into this little box. But like the Bible says, like the Apostle Peter said, when those who object to the why you live the way you live, he said that you should be able to make a defense about why you choose to live this way, and not just be like many of these individuals who just act like they're in a cult. The Bible encourages individuals to make an informed decision about how they want to live their lives, and that's based on freedom, which you see many Americans nowadays don't want to live as free people. They literally want the government to pick and choose everything that they do, and to have them like in the little painting, don't color outside of the lines, right? The government literally is going to give them all the lines, and they're going to follow everything that the government wants them to do. This is so much like what happened when the Jews who accepted Christianity and they wanted to live by faith and no longer by sight, the Bible said. And many of the Jews that were living at that time, they couldn't handle living free. And so the Apostle Paul wrote many letters talking about, do not come under a yoke of slavery, right? After Christ has set you free, he says, do not again come under the yoke of slavery. And that is basically what has happened to many people around the globe with these different families that have in essence, have taken over the world. And this goes back way back to biblical. This goes way back to biblical times, where it's just houses, right? Like in the 12 tribes of Israel, and different houses exercised authority over different groups. And it is the same that happens today, where these different houses, these are the people that you never see, right? The Joe Bidens and the Kamala Harrises, or the Netanyahus. These are just the people that are in the front. It's the people that you don't see that are the ones that you have to worry about. Those are the ones who really have the authority. These are the ones who really make the decisions. And of course, these individuals, it's just like, what is it? The old saying is, you see, like, for example, you'll see like the Trump having dinner with the Mitt Romneys, and everybody will get all flustered over Mitt Romney said this one thing, or this politician said one thing. But then when you see behind closed doors, they're all buddy sitting at the table. They go to the same lunches, they eat at the same restaurants, they kind of hang out with each other. They pretend that, like in wrestling, right? They pretend like they're mortal enemies, but then behind closed doors, they're all buddy, and it's solely for the purpose of manipulating people, where the elites, the different houses and or families, as you want to view them, they're the ones who are in complete control. This has happened back in biblical days, and it all is basically around freedom. It all revolves around freedom, the freedom that God had set individuals free, and warned that individuals would come again under a yoke of slavery, because especially in America, these people are not ready to be free, especially men. Especially the men in this country. They're not ready to live as free people, because it means that you are accountable for your actions. You are responsible for the things that you do. And if things go wrong, it is your fault. And if things go right, it may be related to something that you did. And if there are problems in your life, you see that very much so with the narrative for the Black community, if we're making reference constantly to slavery, and that the reason that everything that is bad is in your life, it's always as a result of slavery. It's never as a result of the single motherhood rate, the lack of education, the violence, etc. Right? And this is just basically to keep people in their positions and to kind of pit people against one another. And you see this literally from country to country to country. Like I said in a previous video, the book of Samuel talks extensively about this. I believe it's First Samuel chapter 8, where the nation of Israel said, we want a king like the other nations, right? We want humans to rule over us. And God warned the nation of Israel, said, I've given you the law, I've given you the prophets to help you, I've given you the judges to help render judgment, but I am the one who rules over you. God is the one. The Almighty had said that I am the one. And they said, we don't want to be ruled by the Almighty. We want you to set up a king for us. You go read that account in the book of Samuel. Samuel talks extensively about this. And when you look at human history, it repeats the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. As a result of man constantly choosing humans to rule over them instead of the Most High, they constantly fall victim to the same narrative.